It was at my own family's New Year's Eve party that I saw my name on a list, and next to it, the 3 words that would shatter 30 years of silence. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I wish I could claim that the label came as a complete shock. The reality is, I'd spent the better part of a decade turning a blind eye to the small slights, the carefully orchestrated exclusions, and the way conversations would halt the moment I walked into a room. But seeing it there in black ink, Arthur, the resentful old man, scrawled on the gift exchange list for everyone to see, was an entirely different kind of wound. This was a deliberate act of cruelty. My hands began to tremble as I stood in the elegant, marble-tiled foyer of my daughter Eleanor's home, staring at the list pinned to a large corkboard normally reserved for family announcements and children's drawings. All around me, the sounds of celebration swirled, the clinking of glasses, warm laughter, and overlapping conversations as relatives arrived for our annual New Year's gathering. They were all blissfully unaware of the dagger that had just been driven straight through my chest. I read the list again, a desperate hope flickering that my eyes had deceived me. Eleanor and Mark hosting my brother-in-law Kevin and his wife, my nephews with their growing families, and there, scrawled at the very bottom, Arthur, the resentful old man. Grandpa, come look at what I got for Christmas. My 7-year-old grandson, Leo, tugged insistently on the sleeve of my sweater, his face beaming with pure, unadulterated excitement. I managed to force a smile, swallowing hard against the thick lump forming in my throat. Just a minute, buddy. Grandpa has to fix something first. With careful, steady fingers, I unpinned the list, folded it into a neat, sharp, creased square, and slid it deep into my trouser pocket. My eyes scanned the crowded living room until they landed on my son-in-law, Mark. He was standing near the fireplace, looking effortlessly handsome in a tailored blazer, captivating a small group of Eleanor's colleagues from her law firm. Mark always possessed that kind of easy, polished charm that could make others feel inadequate just by being in his presence. But tonight, as I watched him laugh and run a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair, all I could perceive was a deep-seated malice. Eleanor stood close by, her hand resting affectionately on Mark's arm. My daughter, my only child, who once looked at me as if I held the entire universe in my hands. Now, she could barely hold my gaze. I made my way toward them slowly, waiting for a natural pause in their conversation. When Mark finally noticed me approaching, his broad smile tightened imperceptibly at the edges. Arthur, there you are. We were just wondering where you'd gotten to. His voice was as smooth as honey, but his eyes held a familiar coldness I had long since grown accustomed to. I need to speak with both of you, I said, my voice low and steady. In private. Eleanor's brow furrowed with concern. Dad, we're right in the middle of the party. Can't it wait? No, I said, with a firmness that surprised even myself. It can't. 10 minutes later, the 3 of us stood in Eleanor's quiet home office, the heavy oak door shut against the muffled sounds of the celebration. I unfolded the list and placed it deliberately on the polished surface of her mahogany desk. Would either of you care to explain this to me? I asked. Mark glanced at it with a dismissive wave of his hand. It's just the gift list, Arthur. What's the problem? Read what you wrote next to my name. Eleanor picked up the paper, her cheerful expression faltering as her eyes scanned the words. Mark, she whispered, turning to him. Did you write this? He rolled his eyes. Oh, come on, Ellie. It was just a joke. Your dad knows I didn't mean anything by it. A joke? I repeated, my voice remaining unnervingly calm despite the fury raging inside me. To publicly humiliate me in front of our entire family? Oh, please, Mark scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. Don't be so dramatic. Nobody even noticed. I noticed. The words came out sharper, harder than I intended. Eleanor sighed, running a hand through her hair, a gesture so reminiscent of her mother it made my heart ache. Dad, I'm sure Mark didn't mean any harm. You know what his sense of humor can be like. Always defending him, always taking his side. I looked directly at my daughter. Did you know about this? Her brief hesitation was all the answer I needed. You did, I whispered, the realization a fresh blow. You knew he wrote this, and you let him. Mark snorted. For God's sake, Arthur, it's New Year's Eve. Can we just drop this? Some of us are trying to have a good time. In that moment, something inside me finally snapped. 30 years of swallowed insults, of turning the other cheek, of making excuses for their behavior. It all came to a head right then and there. No, Mark, I said, my voice steely. We're doing this now. I turned my attention back to my daughter, Eleanor. I have tolerated his disrespect for years. I've watched you transform into someone I hardly recognize, but this crosses a definitive line. Dad, she started, but I held up a hand to cut her off. Do you have any idea what I was doing at your age? I was working 2 jobs to make sure you had everything you could possibly need after your mother passed away. I was skipping meals so you could have new clothes for school. My voice cracked with the weight of decades of unspoken sacrifice. I was loving you more than I loved myself. Mark rolled his eyes again. Here we go with the martyr act. Eleanor placed a warning hand on his arm. For the first time, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. Mark, that's enough. No, it's not enough, I said, a surge of strength I hadn't felt in years coursing through me. I have spent years being made to feel like an inconvenience in my own family. But I will not spend one more minute being openly ridiculed. I picked up my coat from the leather armchair where I'd left it. The party isn't over, Dad, Eleanor said, a hint of panic in her voice. Where are you going? I straightened my shoulders and met her gaze directly. I'm going home. And I'm going to think long and hard about whether I want to remain part of a family that treats me this way. The look of pure shock on her face was almost worth all the pain of the evening. Almost. As I walked out of the office, Mark's condescending voice trailed after me. He'll be back. Where else is he going to go? He had no idea that this was far from over. The secret I had guarded for 3 decades was about to unravel everything. The drive home from Eleanor's that night was a hazy blur of streaking streetlights and hot tears. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles bone white, trying to keep my focus on the slick, rain-swept road as a lifetime of memories rushed back, overwhelming me like a broken dam. For 30 years, I had buried certain truths so deep that I'd almost managed to convince myself that my own carefully constructed narrative was real. But tonight, with the words, resentful old man, seared into my mind, the pretense was no longer possible. My small apartment felt cavernous and empty when I arrived. It was modest, but comfortable, all I could afford after helping Eleanor with the down payment on her first house. I'd told her the money was from her college fund, another necessary lie in a long history of them. My hands were still trembling slightly as I made a cup of tea and sat down at my small kitchen table. Across the room, on a dusty bookshelf, sat an old photo album I rarely allowed myself to open. After a moment of hesitation, I retrieved it, a fine layer of dust coating my fingertips. The first photograph was of me at 25, holding a baby Eleanor. My face was thinner back then, and my smile, though weary, was genuine. I gently traced the outline of the tiny infant swaddled in my arms, a visceral memory of how impossibly small she had felt. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Eleanor. Dad, please come back to the party. You're making a scene by leaving. I flipped the phone face down on the table without replying. I turned the page. More photos. Eleanor's first hesitant steps. Her first day of kindergarten. Her small hand clutching mine so tightly I thought she might never let go. Her high school graduation, for which I had worked months of overtime shifts to afford the designer watch she'd wanted so desperately. I had done everything for that girl. After her mother, Catherine, died when Eleanor was just 4, I had to become both mother and father. I took on a second job cleaning offices late at night after my day shift as a hospital orderly. I learned to fix leaky pipes and change a flat tire. I struggled through math homework that was far beyond my own understanding. I was at every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, and cooked every single meal. And for what? So my daughter could stand idly by while her husband branded me a resentful old man. I flipped further into the album to more recent times. Eleanor's law school graduation. The strained smile on my face in the photo, standing just slightly apart from her in her cap and gown. The emotional distance between us had already begun to form by then. And then came Mark. They had met at a colleague's wedding 6 years ago. Eleanor was just starting to make a name for herself at the firm, and Mark was a paralegal with a mountain of ambition. He was handsome, intelligent, and could be incredibly charming when it suited him. Eleanor was completely smitten from the very beginning. I vividly remember the first time she brought him over to meet me. I had spent the entire day cooking her favorite meal, pot roast with all the trimmings, hoping to make a good impression. Mark had smiled politely, complimented my quaint apartment, and barely touched his food. All through dinner he expertly steered the conversation towards Eleanor's career, her vast potential, and the glittering future he clearly saw for them. It was a vision in which I was conspicuously absent. After they left, Eleanor called, bubbling with excitement about how much Mark had liked me. I didn't have the heart to tell her that I had seen the cold, calculating assessment in his eyes as he looked around my home, sizing up my worth and finding it wanting. The changes started subtly. Eleanor's calls became less frequent. Our weekly Sunday dinners dwindled to monthly, and then to once a season. Whenever I visited their new house after the wedding, Mark would inevitably find some urgent project for Eleanor to help with, leaving me to sit alone in their cavernous living room with a cup of tea and the distinct feeling of being an intruder. Then came the grandchildren, Leo first, and then little Chloe 2 years later. I had harbored a secret hope that becoming a grandfather would bridge the growing gap between Eleanor and me, but Mark had different plans. He controlled my access to the children with an iron will disguised in a velvet glove. "The kids are napping," he'd say smoothly when I called to ask if I could visit. "We're just so swamped with their activities this weekend." Or his personal favorite, "They were exposed to a bug at school and we wouldn't want you to catch it at your age." Always plausible, always reasonable, and always a lie. On the rare occasions I did see the children, Mark would hover nearby, correcting my outdated parenting techniques and offering patronizing suggestions on how a modern grandfather should behave. The doorbell jolted me out of my reverie. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearly midnight. Who could possibly be visiting at this hour on New Year's Eve? I opened the door to find Eleanor standing on my doorstep, her face flushed, though whether from the biting cold or from anger, I couldn't be sure. "Dad," she said, stepping past me into the apartment without an invitation. "What were you thinking leaving like that? Mark is upset. The guests are asking questions." "Mark is upset?" I cut her off, the sharpness in my voice startling us both. "Your husband publicly humiliated me, and you're worried about his feelings?" Eleanor let out a heavy sigh, running her hand through her hair again. "Look, I know it was in poor taste, but it was just a joke. You know how Mark gets when he's planning these events. He gets carried away. This wasn't getting carried away, Eleanor. This was deliberate and cruel. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. Maybe you're right. I'll talk to him about it. Like you've talked to him all the other times? I asked quietly. Like the time he forgot to invite me to Chloe's birthday party? Or the time he told Leo I was too busy to come to his school play when I was never even told about it? Eleanor frowned. That's not. He wouldn't do that. He would, and he has, I said firmly. For years, and you've let him. She stood in silence for a moment, then glanced at her watch. Look, it's almost midnight. I need to get back to our guests. Can we please talk about this tomorrow, when everyone has calmed down? I looked at my daughter, the little girl I had given my entire life to, now a woman who couldn't or wouldn't see the truth right in front of her. A decision settled in my heart. Yes, I said finally, we can talk tomorrow. There's something important I need to tell you anyway. Something I should have told you a very long time ago. Eleanor looked relieved, already inching toward the door. Good, that's good. I'll come by in the afternoon, okay? After she was gone, I returned to the photo album, flipping all the way back past Eleanor's baby pictures to the handful of photos I usually kept hidden away. The truth was right there, hiding in plain sight in those faded images. If only anyone had ever known to look. It was the answer to why I had tolerated Mark's cruelty for so long, why I had endured being pushed aside and marginalized by my own family. It was because Eleanor wasn't really my daughter, and tomorrow, after 30 years of silence, I was finally going to tell her the truth. I barely slept a wink that night. How could I? Knowing that the carefully constructed world I had built for 3 decades was about to come crashing down. I had rehearsed this conversation in my mind thousands of times over the years, but now that the moment was finally here, no amount of preparation felt adequate. Morning arrived, with a pale, watery winter sunlight filtering through my blinds. I made coffee and toast, but found I couldn't bring myself to eat. My stomach was a tight knot of anxiety as I waited. At 10 minutes past 2, the doorbell rang. I took a deep, steadying breath before opening it. Eleanor stood on the welcome mat, looking exhausted. Her eyes were slightly bloodshot, a testament to a late night of hosting and, I assumed, dealing with the fallout from my abrupt departure. "Hi, Dad," she said, stepping inside. I noted the absence of a hug. There hadn't been many of those in recent years. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked, using the mundane offer of hospitality as a shield to delay the inevitable. "No thanks. I can't stay long. Mark has a charity luncheon at 4, and I promised I'd watch the kids." Of course. Mark's schedule always came first. We sat in the small, sunlit living room, a heavy, uncomfortable silence stretching between us. Eleanor checked her phone twice before I finally found the courage to speak. "I need to show you something," I said, rising from my chair and heading to the bedroom closet. I returned with an old, worn cardboard box, its edges frayed from countless moves over the years. I placed it gently on the coffee table between us. Eleanor eyed it warily. "What is this, Dad? If this is some kind of file you've been keeping on Mark—" "It's not about Mark," I interrupted softly. "It's about you. It's about where you come from." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "Where I come from? I don't understand." With fingers that trembled slightly, I lifted the lid of the box. Inside was a collection of documents I had kept hidden for 3 decades. A birth certificate with a different father's name, faded letters, old hospital records, and photographs I had never dared to display. "After your mother died," I began, my voice steadier than I'd anticipated, "I was cleaning out her old office, and I found these hidden in a locked drawer of her desk." I handed her the birth certificate first. Eleanor took it, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief as she read the document. "This says my father is Daniel Harmon," she said slowly. But that was Mom's secretary. He wasn't just her secretary, I corrected gently. He was also my brother. The color drained completely from Eleanor's face. What are you saying? Your mother and my brother, Daniel, had an affair. When he got pregnant with you, they decided to keep it a secret. Your mother didn't want to lose me, and Daniel, he wasn't ready to be a father. Eleanor shook her head, a look of utter disbelief on her face. That's not possible. You're my father. I have memories of you, of us growing up. I've raised you since you were 3 months old, I explained, my voice thick with emotion. Daniel died in a car accident when you were just a baby. Your mother came to me, confessed everything, and begged me to raise you as my own. She was terrified of losing custody to Daniel's parents, who had never approved of his relationship with a married woman. Eleanor shot up from the couch, pacing the small confines of my living room like a caged animal. This is insane. Why are you telling me this now? Is this some sort of revenge because you're mad about Mark? No, I said firmly. I've wanted to tell you so many times over the years, but your mother made me promise to keep it a secret. She said it would only cause you pain to know the truth. So what changed? Eleanor demanded, her voice rising with a mixture of anger and hurt. Why now? I took a deep breath. Because I've spent 30 years living with this secret, Eleanor. 30 years of feeling a pang of guilt every time you thanked me for being a good dad. 30 years of feeling like I had to constantly earn my place in your life. I gestured toward the open box. There's more in there. Letters Daniel wrote to your mother. Photos of him holding you as a newborn. Hospital records from your birth. Eleanor stared at the box as if it were a venomous snake. I don't believe this. You have your Uncle Daniel's eyes, I said softly. Sometimes, when you were little, I'd look at you and see him looking back at me. It broke my heart and healed it all at the same time. She hesitantly picked up one of the photographs. It showed a young man, Daniel, cradling a newborn, his face alight with a mixture of joy and exhaustion. Now that she knew what to look for, the resemblance between them was undeniable. My whole life has been a lie, she whispered, her voice cracking. No, I insisted, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. Your life has been real. Your childhood, your achievements, your own family, that's all real. I loved you from the very moment your mother placed you in my arms. I have always loved you as my own. Eleanor looked at me with new, searching eyes, as if looking for some physical trait we shared that would disprove everything I was telling her. Does Mark know? The question caught me off guard. No. No one knows but me and your mother, before she passed. With shaking hands, Eleanor began gathering the documents, stuffing them haphazardly back into the box. I need time to process this. I need to think. I understand, I said, though my heart was breaking all over again. Take all the time you need. She stood, clutching the box to her chest. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I had a right to know. Yes, you did, I acknowledged. But I was so afraid of losing you. And your mother made me promise. My mother? Eleanor repeated the words as if they were foreign. The woman who cheated on you with your own brother and then asked you to raise her love child. I flinched at the raw bitterness in her voice. Catherine made a terrible mistake, but she loved you very much. And so did I. So do I. Eleanor walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the doorknob. I need to go. Will you call me? I asked, hating the small, desperate sound of my own voice. When you're ready to talk? She didn't answer. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt more final and devastating than a slam ever could. I sank onto the couch, a profound exhaustion washing over me. The secret that had been my constant companion for 3 decades was finally out. But instead of the relief I had expected, I felt nothing but a hollow emptiness and a creeping, paralyzing fear. What if Eleanor could never forgive me for the deception? What if, in trying to reclaim my place in her life, I had just destroyed what little relationship we had left? I picked up a photograph that had fallen from the box, one of Daniel holding baby Eleanor, and traced his face with my fingertip. I kept my promise, I whispered to my long-dead brother. I raised her as my own. I loved her enough for both of us. But as the long afternoon shadows stretched across my empty apartment, I couldn't help but wonder if love had ever been enough. 3 days crawled by without a single word from Eleanor. I called once, leaving a short voicemail that was never returned. I sent a text message, simply asking if she was okay. It remained unanswered. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I tried to maintain my normal routine, volunteering at the library on Tuesday, my book club on Wednesday, but my mind was a million miles away. Had I made a catastrophic mistake? Should I have honored Catherine's wishes and taken the secret to my grave? On Thursday evening, as I was preparing a simple dinner of soup and a sandwich, my doorbell rang. My heart leaped into my throat. Eleanor? But when I opened the door, it was Mark standing there. He looked as immaculate as ever. Not a hair out of place in his perfectly tailored overcoat, his expression unreadable despite the January chill. But his eyes were like chips of ice, glinting with a cold fury. "What have you done?" he demanded, pushing past me into the apartment without an invitation. I closed the door slowly, bracing myself for the confrontation to come. "Hello, Mark." "Don't hello, Mark me." He spun around to face me, his expensive cologne instantly filling my small living room. "Eleanor has barely spoken a word to anyone since New Year's. She's sleeping in the guest room. She won't tell me what's wrong, but I know it has something to do with you." I moved toward the kitchen. "Would you like some tea?" "I don't want tea. I want answers." His voice rose sharply. "What did you say to her? What lie did you spin about me to try and drive a wedge between us?" I filled the kettle anyway, the simple task giving me something to do with my trembling hands. I told her the truth about something. "What truth? What are you talking about?" I turned to face him squarely. "I don't believe that's my story to share with you. If Eleanor wants you to know, she'll tell you herself." His eyes narrowed into slits. "You spiteful old man. You just couldn't stand seeing us happy, could you? You couldn't bear the thought that Eleanor has a life that doesn't revolve around you anymore." The kettle began to whistle, and I turned to silence it. "This has nothing to do with you, Mark, though I won't pretend your treatment of me over the years has been anything less than deeply painful." "Oh, here we go," he sneered, rolling his eyes dramatically. "Poor Arthur, the eternal victim. It's always about you, isn't it?" I poured the hot water over a tea bag, watching the dark color slowly seep into the water. "Actually, it rarely island. That's rather the point. You know what your problem is?" Mark jabbed a manicured finger in my direction. "You're jealous. You resent the fact that Eleanor chose me, that she values my opinion over yours. You hate that I'm the father of her children, that I'm the center of her world now." I took a deep breath and looked him directly in the eye. "No, Mark. My problem is that you have systematically worked to isolate Eleanor from me since the day you met her. My problem is that you have deliberately limited my access to my own grandchildren. My problem is that you have consistently treated me like a nuisance rather than a member of your family." His laugh was a sharp, brittle sound. "Is that what you told her? All your paranoid delusions about me?" "I told her the truth about her birth," I said quietly. "About her biological father." Mark's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together in confusion. "What are you talking about? You're her father." "No." The single word hung in the air between us. I'm her uncle, her mother's husband, but I am not her biological father. Mark stared at me, for once in his life, completely speechless. I could almost see the gears turning in his mind as he rapidly reassessed every single thing he thought he knew. "You're lying," he finally managed to say, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "I have the birth certificate, hospital records, photographs. Eleanor has them now." Mark sank heavily into one of my kitchen chairs, his polished composure finally cracking. "That's what she's been looking at," he murmured, almost to himself. "She's been locked in her office for days with some old box." I sat across from him, cradling my warm mug of tea. I raised her as my own after her biological father, my brother, died. No one knew except her mother and me. "Why tell her now?" Mark asked, his voice quieter now. After all these years, I considered my answer carefully. "Partly because of what you wrote on that list at the party," I admitted. "That was a breaking point for me. But mostly because she deserves to know who she island. I've carried this secret for far too long." Mark was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had regained some of its familiar cutting edge. "So this is your grand revenge. For all the little slights you've imagined over the years, you drop a bomb that completely destroys her sense of identity." "It wasn't about revenge," I insisted, though a small, honest part of me wondered if I was being entirely truthful with myself. Hadn't I wanted to shake up Eleanor's world, to make her question everything, including her unwavering loyalty to Mark? Mark stood, smoothing down his coat. "You claim I've tried to separate Eleanor from you. Well, congratulations. You might have just done that job all by yourself." The words stung, because they were a perfect echo of my own deepest fears. "That was never my intention." "Intentions don't matter, Arthur," Mark snapped. "Results do. And right now, my wife is questioning her entire existence because you decided your hurt feelings were more important than her well-being." Before I could formulate a response, the front door to my apartment opened. We both turned to see Eleanor standing in the doorway, key in hand, the spare I had given her years ago, the one she so rarely used. Her eyes darted from me to Mark, her expression shifting from surprise to a flash of anger. "What are you doing here?" she asked her husband. Mark's posture immediately softened. His voice adopted a gentle, concerned tone I had never once heard him use with me. "I was worried about you, honey. You've been so distant, and I thought maybe Arthur could help me understand what was wrong." Eleanor's expression hardened. "So, you came here behind my back. Did he tell you?" she asked, gesturing toward me. Mark hesitated. "About your birth father?" "Yes." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "That was not his story to tell you." "I agree," Mark said quickly. "It was completely inappropriate of him to—" "I'm not finished," Eleanor interrupted, her voice sharp. She turned to me. "Dad, Arthur, you shouldn't have told him. That should have been my decision. But you also shouldn't have kept this from me for 30 years. I flinched as she corrected herself from Dad to Arthur. "Everyone has been lying to me," Eleanor continued, her voice rising with emotion. "My entire life is built on a foundation of lies." "That's not true," I began, but she cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Isn't it? You're not my father. The woman I called my mother cheated on you with your own brother. And you?" She turned her furious gaze on Mark. "You've been actively working to keep me away from the man who raised me." Mark's eyes widened in feigned innocence. "What are you talking about?" "I found your texts, Mark," Eleanor said flatly. "The ones to your sister, bragging about how you've been managing the father-in-law problem, laughing about excluding him from family events." The color drained from Mark's face. "Ellie, that was just venting. You know how challenging Arthur can be sometimes." "No, Mark, I don't know that." Eleanor's voice was ice cold. "What I do know is that I have been blind to so many things." She turned back to me. "I need more time. I have so many questions, but I'm not ready to ask them yet." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Eleanor walked toward the door, then paused. "Don't come home tonight," she said to Mark, without even looking at him. "I need space to think." She hesitated for a moment, her gaze falling on me. "My dad, Arthur, isn't the only one who's been keeping secrets." The door closed behind her, leaving Mark and me in a stunned, heavy silence. Mark recovered first, his shock quickly morphing back into pure rage as he snatched his car keys from the counter. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice low and threatening. "You've ruined everything." He stormed out, slamming the door hard behind him. I couldn't help but think that he was right. I had ruined everything: our fragile family dynamic, Eleanor's sense of self, and quite possibly her marriage. But for the first time in years, I had spoken my truth. And despite the searing pain and the chaos I knew would follow, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. The weeks that followed were the loneliest I have ever endured. Eleanor retreated into a profound silence, and I respected her need for space, though each day that passed without any contact felt like a physical ache in my chest. I found myself checking my phone constantly, my heart leaping at every notification, only to be disappointed when it wasn't from her. January bled into a bleak and gray February, with bitter winds that seemed to mirror the turmoil in my own heart. I stuck to my routines, volunteering at the library, attending my book club, working my part-time job, but I felt like a ghost moving through my own life, present in body but absent in spirit. My friend Susan from book club noticed the change in me. "You haven't been yourself lately, Arthur," she observed over coffee one afternoon. "Is everything all right?" I hesitated, then offered her a simplified version of the truth. "Just some family troubles. My daughter and I are going through a difficult time." She nodded with a sympathetic expression. "My son didn't speak to me for 6 months after his divorce. I thought my heart would break in too, but he eventually came around. I hope Eleanor does too," I said softly. "Just give her time," Susan advised. "People process things in their own way, on their own schedule. Time. It seemed that was all I had in abundance of these days. Empty, silent hours to fill with regrets and endless what-ifs. I would catch myself staring at my phone, trying to will it to ring, or poring over old photographs, trying to see what Eleanor might be seeing in them now, the truth that had been hidden in plain sight all along. I worried constantly about my grandchildren. Did they ask about me? Had Eleanor told them anything? I missed Leo's gap-toothed grin and Chloe's solemn, endless questions about the world. I even found myself missing the chaotic energy of family dinners, as strained as they had often been. Valentine's Day came and went. I sent cards to Leo and Chloe, just as I did every year, but received no acknowledgement. I couldn't help but wonder if Mark had intercepted them. Then, on a dreary, rainy Wednesday in late February, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Eleanor standing there, soaked from the downpour, her expression completely unreadable. "May I come in?" she asked, her tone formal, as if she were a stranger, and not the little girl I had raised from infancy. "Of course." I stepped aside, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Let me get you a towel." When I returned from the linen closet, she was standing in the exact same spot, rainwater dripping onto my welcome mat. She took the towel with a murmured, "Thanks," and patted her face dry. "I've been doing some research," she said, without any preamble. "I found some of Daniel's old friends from high school. They confirmed your story." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I also found his parents, My grandparents, I guess. They're still alive, living out in Arizona. The Harmons, I said softly. Did you contact them? Eleanor shook her head. Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. I gestured toward the living room. Please, sit down. Can I get you some tea, or maybe something stronger? A hint of a smile touched her lips. Tea is fine. While I prepared it in the kitchen, I could hear her moving around the living room, pausing to look at the photographs I had on the walls. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, she was holding a framed picture of herself at around 8 years old, grinning a gap-toothed smile in a dusty Little League uniform. I remember this day, she said. I struck out 3 times and missed an easy pop fly in the outfield. I was so upset on the ride home. You were convinced you had let the whole team down, I recalled. I took you for ice cream and told you baseball is just a game, but character is forever, she finished, her voice soft. And then you made me list 3 things I did well that day, even if they had nothing to do with baseball. A real smile spread across my face at the memory. You said you'd been a good sport, you'd encouraged your teammates, and you'd remembered to thank the coach even though you were disappointed. Eleanor set the photo down carefully on the end table. That was real. That moment. You being my dad. Yes, I agreed. It was. She took the mug I offered and sat on the couch, looking more weary than a woman in her 30s should. Mark and I are separating. The news shouldn't have come as a surprise, but it still landed like a punch to the gut. I'm so sorry. Eleanor gave a short, humorless laugh. Are you? Yes, I said, and I meant it. I never wanted to cause you this pain. It wasn't just about this, she said, gesturing vaguely to encompass the entire revelation of her birth. We've been having problems for a long time. I didn't want to see them. After I found out the truth, I started questioning everything, including the way Mark treats you. I saw the texts. I started paying attention to how he talks about you when you're not around. I remembered all the times he forgot to invite you to things, or conveniently scheduled visits for when I wouldn't be home. I remained silent, letting her work through it. He always had a plausible excuse, she continued, and I believed him because it was easier than confronting the alternative, that my own husband was deliberately trying to isolate me from my father. She looked at me. Dad, let me finish. She set her mug down firmly on the coffee table. I've had a lot of time to think these past few weeks. About you, about Mom, about Daniel, about all the choices everyone made. I braced myself for her anger, for her judgment. What you did, she said instead. Raising me as your own, after what Mom and Daniel did to you, that was an extraordinary act of love. I'm not sure I could have done the same. Tears sprang to my eyes, hot and unexpected. You were just a baby, I whispered. None of it was your fault. And none of it was your fault either, Eleanor said firmly. But you took on the responsibility anyway. You gave up your chance to have biological children of your own, because Mom didn't want any more kids. You sacrificed your own career aspirations to work 2 jobs so I could have every opportunity. You did all of that for a child who wasn't even yours by birth. You are mine, I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion, in every single way that matters. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. I'm still angry, she admitted, at Mom for her betrayal, at Daniel for leaving you to clean up his mess, even though I know his death wasn't his choice, and at you for not telling me the truth sooner. I understand, I said softly. You have every right to be angry, but I'm also so incredibly grateful, she continued, her voice breaking, for the life you gave me, for the unconditional love you've always shown me, even when I didn't deserve it. My own tears spilled over then, and I made no attempt to hide them. You always deserved it. Always. Eleanor reached out hesitantly and took my hand. It was the first physical contact we had shared in weeks, and I clung to it like a lifeline. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "With Mark? With us? With any of this? But I do know that I don't want to lose you again." "You won't," I promised. "I'm right here." We sat together in comfortable silence for a long while, the gentle sound of the rain against the window panes filling the space between us. It wasn't a perfect storybook reconciliation. Too much had happened for that, but it was a beginning. As Eleanor prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "The kids miss you," she said. "Especially Leo. He keeps asking when he can see his grandpa." "Grandpa?" The word had never sounded sweeter. "Anytime," I said, my heart feeling lighter than it had in years. "I'm always here for them." "And for you?" Eleanor nodded. "I know you always have been." She hesitated, then added one more word. "Dad." It was just a single word, but it meant everything. 1 year later, I stood in my sun-drenched kitchen, arranging chocolate chip cookies on a platter, while Chloe chattered away at the table, her small hands covered in colored paper and glitter. "Do you think Daddy will like his birthday card?" she asked, holding up her masterpiece for my inspection. "He will absolutely love it," I assured her, pointing to the glittery stick figure family she had drawn in the corner. "That's me, and Leo, and Daddy, and you, Grandpa," she explained seriously. "And that's our dog, Oscar, and that's Brian." I smiled at the mention of Eleanor's new boyfriend. Brian had come into her life about 6 months ago, a fellow attorney with a warm, easy laugh and kind eyes. Unlike Mark, he had treated me with genuine respect from the moment we met, asking about my life and actually listening to the answers. "Brian is very handsome," I agreed, placing the last cookie on the platter. "He's nice too," Chloe said, returning to her artwork. "He lets me help when he cooks, even if I make a mess." From the living room, I could hear the cheerful sounds of Leo and Eleanor setting up the new board game I'd bought for our family game night, a weekly tradition we had started 3 months ago. The sound of their shared laughter was a balm to my soul, warming me more than the summer sunshine streaming through my kitchen window. So much had changed in a year. Eleanor and Mark's separation had finalized into a divorce. It had been bitter and contentious at first, but they had eventually settled on a custody arrangement that gave Eleanor the children for most of the year. Mark had taken a new job in Chicago, which meant the kids spent the school year with Eleanor and summers with him. Eleanor had moved out of the large, sterile house she'd shared with Mark and bought a smaller, cozier one much closer to me. It wasn't perfect. The roof needed some work, and the backyard was little more than a patch of grass. But it felt more like a home than the ostentatious showcase she had lived in before. And I had changed, too. After 30 years of playing a part, the father who wasn't really a father, the inconvenient family member to be tolerated, but never truly included, I was finally just being myself. Author, grandfather, father by choice, if not by birth, a man with his own interests and opinions and value. I had even cautiously started dating again, just coffee dates so far with a kind widow named Helen, whom I'd met at the library. Eleanor had been surprised at first, and then incredibly supportive. "You deserve to be happy, Dad," she'd said, and the words had brought tears to my eyes. "Grandpa, can I lick the spoon?" Leo dashed into the kitchen, his eyes fixed on the bowl of chocolate frosting. "Of course you can," I said with a wink. "It's the chef's privilege." Eleanor appeared in the doorway, watching us with a soft smile. "Need any help in here?" "We're almost done," I assured her. "Just finishing up the frosting for your cake." She came to stand beside me, reaching over to swipe a finger through the rich frosting. I swatted her hand away playfully. "Wait your turn, Dad," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." My heart gave a familiar stutter. Even after a year of healing, I still braced myself for rejection whenever her voice took on that particular tone. "I contacted Daniel's parents," she said quietly. "My other grandparents." I set the frosting bowl down carefully on the counter. "I see. And how did that go?" "Better than I expected. They're in their 80s now, but still sharp as tacks. They told me all about Daniel, what he was like as a child, his favorite books, how much he loved photography." "He did," I confirmed, a flood of memories of my younger brother washing over me. "He always had a camera in his hands. They showed me his old photos. He was really talented." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Daniel had been talented in many ways, smarter than me, more handsome, more confident. It had been painfully easy to understand why Catherine had fallen for him. "They asked about you," Eleanor continued. "They remembered you from family gatherings years ago. They wanted to know if you were still in my life." "What did you tell them?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Eleanor placed her hand over mine on the counter. "I told them the truth, that you have been my father, in every single way that matters, that you gave up everything to raise me, that I couldn't have possibly asked for a better dad." Fresh tears stung my eyes. "You said that?" "I did, and I meant every word." She squeezed my hand gently. "But that's not all. They want to meet you." "Me?" I echoed, surprised. "Yes, they said they've always been so grateful to you for giving me the love and stability that Daniel couldn't. They never reached out because Mom told them you wanted a clean break to raise me as your own without any complications." Another one of Catherine's lies, I realized. So many deceptions over the years, all in the name of protecting her own comfortable life. "They'd like to meet you, Dad, if you're open to it." I considered the idea. A year ago, it would have terrified me meeting the parents of the man whose child I'd raised, the brother whose betrayal had irrevocably changed the course of my life. But now, "I think I'd like that," I said finally. "They're a part of your history, and your history is mine." Eleanor smiled, a look of profound relief on her face. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." From the other room, Leo's voice called out, "Dad, Grandpa, are we playing this game or what?" "Coming," Eleanor called back. She turned to me. "Ready?" I looked around my little kitchen, at Chloe happily creating her art at the table, at the birthday cake waiting to be frosted, at my daughter standing beside me, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely wanted to be there. I felt a sense of deep contentment I had never thought possible. "More than ready," I replied. As we all gathered around the living room table for the game, laughter and easy conversation flowing between us, I couldn't help but marvel at how much life can change. A year ago, I had stood in my daughter's grand foyer, staring at a cruel label someone had assigned to me. The resentful old man. That single moment of profound humiliation had, improbably, led to this: a genuine, loving connection with my daughter, a place of honor in my grandchildren's lives, and a sense of personal peace I had never known before. The secret I had carried for 30 years, the truth I had finally dared to reveal, hadn't destroyed us after all. It had set us free. Later, as Eleanor blew out the candles on her cake, Chloe perched happily on her lap and Leo cheering beside her, she caught my eye across the table and mouthed 2 simple words. "Thank you," I smiled back, my heart full to bursting. The past year had taught me that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's created through choice, through sacrifice, and through the hard, necessary work of forgiveness. Eleanor wasn't my biological daughter, but she was my child in every way that truly mattered. I had chosen to be her father 30 years ago, and every single day since. And finally, after all these years, she had chosen me too. As Brian helped slice the cake, chatting easily with me about a book we'd both recently read, I felt the last lingering pieces of my old life, the pretense, the fear, the silent suffering fall away completely. "Make a wish, Daddy," Chloe urged as Eleanor prepared to blow out her candles. Eleanor looked around the table, her gaze lingering on each of us before finally returning to me. "I don't need to," she said softly. "I already have everything I could ever wish for." I knew then that the label Mark had intended to wound me with had lost all its power. There was nothing left to resent when you already possessed what truly mattered. Love freely given and honestly received. That night, as I prepared for bed in my quiet apartment, I took out an old photograph of Daniel, the last one taken before his accident. I'd kept it hidden away in a box for decades, too painful to look at, yet too important to ever throw away. "He turned out well," I told his smiling image softly. "You would be so proud of him." For the very first time, I felt no bitterness as I looked at my brother's face. Only peace. The secret that had held a family captive in silence for so long had finally been spoken aloud. And in its wake, we found not destruction, but healing. I placed the photograph on my bedside table instead of returning it to its hiding place. Tomorrow, I decided, I would buy a proper frame for it. It was time to bring all the parts of our complicated story into the light. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.